What
What is
up?
up, my dude?
How's it going?
It's going good, man. I'm just glad to see you. My illustrious co-host over here has been battling some illnesses.
Yeah, I've been pretty sick. It's probably my first time out of my room, and I'm COVID negative, but I definitely have been had quite a bad bug since Saturday. It's what's kept us from doing this episode. So we are publishing this episode literally the day before the next episode, which is good news for all of our homies who are going to watch this and be like, man, yeah, this was fun. I need more Exandria. T minus 24 hours. You got it.
That's right. You know, it honestly works out. I kind of like it because it's priming me up, and then I don't even have to wait very long. So
Hmm.
maybe we should do this more often. Who knows? Or
Yeah.
actually, I guess we already know we're well. I won't digress too far, but we have to film tomorrow's episode almost immediately. So maybe for the
Right.
finale, we'll see.
Because you're doing a little vacay, right?
Yeah, yes, sir. Going to the Pacific Northwest.
Wow. What's
Yeah,
the occasion?
well the excuse for the trip is a wedding.
Yeah, okay.
So we're going out there for that, and then we were like, well, let's just turn this into like a full vacay. So
I know for some reason when I asked that question, I envisioned you being like, none of your business and getting like really serious.
like, hey man, not
Uh,
cool.
all the viewers are like, I thought they were friends.
Don't ask me personal questions on the podcast.
So, but yeah, no, I'm glad to be back and still feeling pretty tired, pretty worn out, but excited to talk one of my favorite weekly hobbies, which is Exandria Unlimited.
That's right, baby. EXU episode 6. Oh gosh, I don't know the title of the episode. Do you?
I got you, baby. It's called, so funny you asked that. It
Vamp,
was
vamp.
definitely called episode 6.
Of Exandria Unlimited.
Should have gone to the YouTube.
The newest campaign from the people over at Critical Role.
The Gift Among the Green.
The Gift Among the Green. Episode 6. Yes. And
We're obviously the right people to talk about Critical Role when we don't even know the episode title.
That's right. So, yeah, that's what we're here to talk about. The Gift Among the Green, I believe. And I think I didn't say this yet. So, we're the Pixelists. That's Blake. I'm Will. We talk about stuff we enjoy. And I guess let's just jump right into it. We've dilly-dallied enough. So yes, EXU episode 6. And I mean, I guess first things first, initial thoughts. What did you think about, did you like it? Did you not like it? Is it going up? Is it going down for you?
Man, here's the deal. Like I hate to be the guy. I feel like you're the guy who's like you're the upper on Critical Role. You're just like, yeah. And I'm like more of like the downer.
Okay.
And you gotta have the yin and the yang a little bit, you
Okay.
know? Let me say first of all, I'm a huge EXU fan. I've really liked EXU. I've liked watching it. This was probably my least favorite episode. I thought this was the weakest one. Only because I don't think it was a bad episode. I think and we'll get more into it when we talk about the episode itself. All of my criticism, I think, of this episode, it all fits into how this was marketed, which was an 8-episode series. So my negativity around the episode is really grounded in that, in it being, okay, we have 2 episodes left. Like,
Yeah.
and really feeling like I wanted it to go farther and see more happen, I think.
That's fair.
But that is my biggest complaint about it in terms of like the acting, in terms of the DMing, in terms of like the interactions. I thought all of that was great D&D, like we actually get on a weekly basis. It's more of like the meta, grander. I don't know how to say it. How it was framed from the get go. And I just keep, and I mentioned this, I think, around episode 2 or 3. I just keep feeling that rub, and I really felt it after episode 6.
Yeah, that's all fair. I get where you're coming from. And I guess we can dive further into that when we really dive into the nuts and bolts. But that's a totally fair criticism. And I'll agree with a lot of that. This wasn't my favorite episode, but I still enjoyed it. Like I've enjoyed all of them, and I know you have too.
Right.
But sorry, it's what I'm trying to think of what episode 5. Oh yeah. Okay, sorry. I'm remembering now with the test and the runestone. I think that I don't want to say they've been going downhill, but like they've taken a little step down, I think, ever since episode 4, because that was a highlight.
Episode 4 was so good
Yeah.
that it, yeah, yeah. And I think episode 5 still had some highlights to it of the dreams were really intense and the
Yes.
party tension was really intense.
True.
So like for that tension to go down, I think we've been going down on that tension each episode, like you mentioned.
Hmm.
And it's a bit unsettling isn't quite the right word, but it's kind of hard to, I guess, groove in with.
Yeah.
I don't know if this
No,
is
yeah.
making sense,
No, I get
but
what
yeah,
you're saying. And
still great D&D though. I'm loving the
yeah,
show, but
exactly. The show, we both love the show. We goose about it all the time. So this is just, our critiques, even though we still love it. But yeah, we'll jump into this. I'm about to go way too off the rails here. So we both liked it, but we were not necessarily our favorite. I guess is
right,
the
right.
best way to put it.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
All right, so before we dive into everything, let's go ahead and do our episode recap, which each week we like to give a recap since this content is so very long. Keep everybody caught up. There's a lot of information. So, and we actually take the recap from this discussion that you're currently witnessing, and we upload that separately just to help out the peeps at home who need a little bit of a refresher. So, if you happen to be one of those people watching the recap, hi, I'm Will, that's Blake, we're the Pixelists. If you are interested in learning and hearing more about EXU, jump on over to our full discussion video, and we'll link that down in the comments, down in the description, whatever YouTube people do. And a little final note there is we do have timestamps. So if you came from the recap, you just watched that whole thing, it will also be in our discussion video, but check those timestamps. You can just skip to exactly the place you want to be. Um, but yeah, I guess without any further ado, let's just jump right into this.
Yeah, let's do it, man.
All
So
right.
this was episode 6, The Gift Among the Green. And this was a almost 5-hour episode. So here's our best chance at recapping it. But basically, the episode opens up. It's been a few days after the crocodile wrangling at the runestone, where Opal flipped the croc, and the parties continue to make its way through the jungle. They eventually come across this lazy river, and they're amazed as they follow this river down. They're following their eyesight down the river, and they see these 100-foot walls of this gray-green concrete ancient city. And fy'ra is smiling. She's proud, and she's saying, "This is Nirdalpak, and it's the last city of the Kinira civilization." And she actually tells them, "This is where I've been leading you through the jungle, and it's actually been hidden all these years, and only those who are able to pass the Wild Mother's test are allowed to actually find it." She also explains that she's been here before. It's where she went when her sister died, and this is the place that bestowed onto her gift that we've seen her use time and time again. The party is, I think, a bit relieved and like, "Oh, finally, we've made it somewhere." And they decide to go skinny dipping. They jump into the river. They're laughing. They're having a great time. And they basically slowly wade down towards the city walls. Once they're there, fy'ra announces herself, and they're allowed in to be brought before the Tetrarchs, who are known as the rulers of the city. Once they get into the city, they realize it's this massively amazing city. It's got at least 15,000 people. There's all sorts of races. Really, just a smorgasbord of even like I think was it goblins? Was it hobgoblins that they see walking around
Yeah,
like as citizens?
I saw lots of stuff, and like as we'll find out later, like elephant people and cat people, like it was a melting pot
It,
seemingly.
it's pretty cool. In fact, why don't you just take it over from there?
Okay, yeah. So they walk into the city, kind of taken aback by all of it, but fy'ra's like, "Hey, we got to make a stop at an old friend's house," and we learn that this is Gnar, I think is how you pronounce it, house, an old friend of fy'ra's, and quick introductions and stuff, and she's immediately like, "Okay, I gotta feed you guys," and she jumps in the kitchen and begins cooking for everyone. And as her and fy'ra are catching up, Gnar mentions that there's been like this ominous tone in the city as of late. and a shadow ever since the dark moon was seen. And she was referring to Ruidus, the smaller moon of Exandria. And she says that one of the tetrarchs, Tetrarch Umeji, has left the city to go south to the Iron Authority, who are like um, this kind of like ominous group that we don't know too much about, but they're like warmongers and they worship the betrayer gods. And basically, that there's a bad omen coming. That's like the vibe in the city. And
Mhm.
Umeji left to go see if the Iron Authority is aware of like what's coming, what's happening. fy'ra is shocked to hear that she's left because that's who she was bringing the party to speak to, Tetrarch Umeji. So she was like, "What? She's not here?" And Gennaro was like, "Yeah, she's not here, but she spent the night at my place before she left." Anyway, the after the party, is meeting Gennaro and all of this, they decide to ask her about the runic sigil from the ash hole. That basically the whole purpose they came here, and she lets them know that well, one, she recognizes it. She's pretty nonchalant about it. She's like, "Yeah, this just means place of burning. Like, what's the big deal? What do you want with this?" And basically lets them know that the the way the symbol is drawn has as much meaning as the actual like calligraphy is not the right word,
Yeah, like
but
the shape of it's just as important as the actual language
right,
itself or something like that.
right. And so she's just like, but yeah, it means place of burning and cool beans. And they're like, oh, okay. And she's like, I'm no scholar. If you're right, did you tell them I was like some scholar? And they're like, no, no, we'll go talk to the other tetrarch and see if
Mhm.
we can find out more. But anyway, while they're eating and stuff, the party meets her dog Gugal, who's this like big mutt of a dog, and they're all beginning to play with him. And Ashley Johnson, of course, as always, gives him scritches. Like, name a more iconic duo between Ashley Johnson and petting an animal. But as they're playing, the dog at one point actually grabs the crown, and they have to kind of wrestle it away from him. It's all a big thing, but Dorian is thankfully able to ultimately get it from him. So they settle down, they're eating, and while they do this, they make their introductions. Formally, fy'ra introduces the whole party to Gnar, and it's here that we learn that Dorian Storm is not Dorian's real name. So everyone begins to pry and be like, "What? What's that's not your real name? What is your real name?" And he says that, "Okay, you know what? I'll tell you guys my real name, but only my first name, and only if everyone else like shares a deep dark secret as well." And so everyone's like, "Okay, we're in." So Dorian reveals his real name is Bronte, and that his mother calls him Bron, but that he still wants everyone to call him Dorian, and that he left his name behind. Um, then Opal reveals that her real name is Georgina and that her mother left when they were very young and she doesn't want anyone to call her Georgina, like still call her Opal. So then we get to Dariax and he's like, I'm a pretty open book. But then he does reveal that he and Tharla Star never actually dated. He was just a big fan and made that up to sound cool. So then we get to Fern, and she's like, I don't really have any secrets. And she like kind of struggles to think of something to say. And then finally reveals that, her parents left a very long time ago. She hasn't seen them in about 50 years. And once again, everyone's like, 50 years? How old are you again? And, I think she's 114, 115 or something crazy like that. But no deep and juicy secrets with her, really. Um, and then with Orem, kind of a similar story, but he does reveal that he doesn't really have a father. Well, he did, but he left when he was young, and his last name was Tarantel, I believe. And Orem kind of just abandoned that name because he didn't really have that father.
Mhm.
But then he says, okay, I actually was checking out Dariax's butt when we were all skinny dipping, and it wasn't half bad. um, and so then we get to fy'ra, or Fudorai, who says that she tells this kind of more serious story about her and her sister when they were younger, how they were climbing this rock, and basically her sister Firakai fell down, and in so doing, kind of crashed into Fudorai, and Fudorai ended up breaking her arm. And Fudorai says that they went back to their parents, and she knew her parents would be mad, so Fudorai just took the whole blame and said it was her own fault. She fell and broke her arm and kind of kept her sister out of all of it. And she basically said that, ever since her sister was mad that, she kind of took all the blame and protected her in that way, and that just kind of explains like the dynamic they always
Mhm.
had since then, since fy'ra is all about protecting her sister. Um, so yeah, they're all swapping these stories, and um, Gennaro basically adds that the Kenoran civilization where they are used to be this massive thing with four large cities in each cardinal direction, and Niropak was at the center. And since there were these four big cities, basically there was a leader of each one, and that is what the Tetrarchs were. And every so often, they would come to Niropak and basically make the decisions to guide their civilization. But that was a long time ago, and now there are no longer the four cities. Niropak is all that remains. And we find out that they are ancient, so much so that they don't refer to Taldore as Taldore. They don't even know what Taldore is. They called it Gwasar. And yeah, I think there was. I feel like there's one other thing she revealed there, but now I can't remember. But
It's a
it,
huge detail, but
yeah,
no, yeah.
but yeah, so she reveals that, and I think it was that, like, oh, you're so old, like, are you ancient? And she's like, no, I'm only 40. Just because this place is ancient doesn't mean the people here are.
Right.
Um, so anyway, after they get all caught up, fy'ra is basically like, okay, you know what? I got to take them to go see the Tetrarch so we can learn more about this rune, and they head off.
Yeah. And so on their way to the format of the city is not very clear, but they're heading basically to like a plaza, like sort of like a central point of the city. And as they arrive to this plaza square, they come across this massive statue known as the Observer. And Abria doesn't really describe much about what this observer looks like, other than that it's feminine. But whenever they look at it, Dariax has this moment sort of outside of the party where the observer actually comes to life and animates and looks down at him and says, "Hi, what are you doing?" And he's like, what's going on?" And she basically says, "Hey, I like what you're doing. And I just wanted you to know that you're going to continue to have my favor if you need it." And he's like, "Well, who are you? Who am I getting favor from?" And she says, "Simply, I observe." And then she also adds, "The gift is strong with many, yourself included." And then says, "My chosen are coming. They'll explain more." Very uncertain what she's meaning.
Yeah.
But then that conversation ends and she returns to being the statue. And the party's kind of like, "Oh, cool statue." And then they realize that Dariax has had now this moment. Fira Rise actually is really surprised that the observer spoke to him and is like, "What did she say? What happened?" And he's like, "Yeah, this is what she said." Well, so Fira kind of explains that the observer basically sees everything and also helps others to be able to see. And they decide to continue on into the central plaza. And as they're walking into the building where the Tetrarchs are, there's these two big lion-esque statues that have it's hard to describe. It's like these three heads that are conjoined,
Yeah.
these lion-esque heads. And Abria sort of casually says, they're kind of like this Bandersnatches-esque
Yeah.
type monster. Well, once they're inside, they meet Tetrarch Thraskell, and Thraskell is a Loxodon, which I don't know if I'm saying that right. Loxodon?
I think
Loxodon?
so.
Okay. I think of it, this is going to really piss off some people. I think of them as like the Babars of Exandria.
Yes.
It's an elephant like race that this is one of the first times they've officially been included in Exandria. And this is one of the Tetrarchs, one of the leaders of Nirdalpak. And Thraskell is some sort of seer, some kind of oracle. And like the observer, they seem to have some kind of deep knowledge about things that are happening, not just in the city, not just outside the city, but especially details about the party. In one case, they're sharing a mirror with Opal, who's just like, "I just need to get a look at myself." And Opal actually sees a familiar face with two different eye colors in the reflection, and she's really taken aback. And Thraskell rightly points out that, hey, this is your mother, isn't it? And Opal's like, yeah. Thraskell also sees other eyes that are watching Opal, which is a reference to eyes that fy'ra has gained insight on other eyes that were watching Opal earlier through her gift.
Right.
And it's pretty obvious this is Murata or the Singorn elves, or we assume it is. And Thraskell basically says, I'll remove the scrying spell from you and keep you from being tracked any longer. Thraskell also goes to Orem, and an acolyte comes out and brings this dark seed that Thraskell hands over to Orem and basically says, hey, this arrived on the wind before you got here, and I knew it was meant for you. And Orem's like, thank you. What do I do with this? And Thraskell's like, you're a Genasi, so make it grow. And he's like, okay. And then to fy'ra, Thraskell talks about fy'ra's family, specifically her sister, and says, essentially, I see your sister alive and waiting for you to the north past Iman. And fy'ra naturally is just totally shocked about this and is like, my sister's alive? Are you kidding me? And Thraskell's like, yeah, your sister's alive. Thraskell also generically talks about the party and describes the party and says there's something really special about all of you. The I don't say necessarily the omen on you, the fate that has sort of been drawn out for all of you. You're all going to make a really important decision for better or for worse. And even says it's either going to be sort of like for a great outcome or a terrible outcome. And even points out that the rune that they've been looking for more information about, they say that it's not just a place of burning, but it's a gateway of power. It's a place of massive energy. On top of this, Thraskell talks also about Umeji going down to the Iron Authority and saying that something is coming, and says, in sort of like a fatalistic kind of way, sort of accepts the fate of whatever's destined for Nidalpak. And even asks the party to remember their experience here and to sort of tell stories of what life was like here, which is not something you sort of just casually tell people if you're going to be around much longer. But it's, Thraskell's sort of talking about this ominous omen over the city, and then finally is like, okay, I'm going to go look at the stars and kind of call it there. So the party heads out, but not before fy'ra doubles back and privately talks to Thraskell. And when they were talking earlier, Dorian had said, hey, why don't we all go south to help your friend Umeji? And Thraskell was like, well, she can probably take care of herself, but if that's what you want to do. Well, fy'ra now at the end of the conversation is like, hey, I'm worried that Dorian wants to go south, not because of Umeji, but because these people worship the betrayer gods. And she basically says, I'm worried about him. And Thraskell says, you're right to be worried. He's losing himself to something, presumably the circlet. And then fy'ra goes back to the party and they exit out of the building. So you want to wrap us up from there?
Yeah. So basically, the entire rest of the episode from that point is this like chase battle scene. So as the party's leaving the plaza, kind of catching up, Opal is all of a sudden struck by a poison dart that just immediately begins to knock her unconscious. And I think it was Dorian happens to notice like movement in the smoke, and so they're like, "Okay, what's going on?" And so basically the chase scene just happens. Someone who's invisible runs in, grabs Opal, throws her over, oh my gosh, over their shoulder, and just begins darting away. So Opal looks like she's levitating, like running away from them because, like I said, she's being carried by someone invisible. So Fern and fy'ra immediately go after her, and Fern transforms into a direwolf and is using her like keen sense of smell in order to track them, since the person's invisible. And actually, what they do is Opal was initially still visible, but this person, we're told, removes like a ring, and that's what was casting greater invisibility, and then puts the ring back on. So then Opal too becomes invisible. Um, so we cut to Ted, who is inside Opal, and she is like fighting off this poison dart that Opal was struck with, and that is giving Opal enough strength to be able to remain conscious during all of this when she should be unconscious. And because of that, she's able to muster the strength to cast Misty Step and teleport actually onto Fern's back, who's the direwolf. And so then the three ladies are all still chasing down this invisible person, and they do manage to catch them and pretty brutally murder them.
Yeah.
Um, Meanwhile, the rest of the party is kind of back a bit at the plaza because not only was there this invisible captor, but there was um, another figure as well, who we come to find out is Murata of the Singorn Elves, and she has cast a spell that has animated those two Bandersnatch statues Blake was just talking about, and is causing them to attack Orem and Dorian, and meanwhile, or sorry, no, yeah, Dorian. So meanwhile,
That's right.
Dariax has used his hat of disguise to make himself look like Opal to try to like provide some distraction because he knew that they were after Opal. So he's like, well, if I look like Opal, maybe I can get them to come back and try to get me. And so while that's going on, Dorian and Orem are fighting off the Bandersnatches and continue to chase Murata. And she basically, in this moment, is revealing that, she's all in on capturing Opal for some reason. She says that all will be lost if she is not able to capture Opal. So they, are deal with these Bandersnatch statues and go after Murata, and she proudly states that I will burn the world to have what I want. And then she, boom, dimension doors out. And so, yeah, they aren't able to stop her or anything. Um, so then, now that all that combat and craziness finishes out, we're able to rescue Opal. Um, the party is basically getting ready to move on, but fy'ra actually says, "You know what? I can no longer go with you. I found out that my sister is still alive, so I have to go. I have to go in that direction. I have to go try and find my sister." So she kind of says her goodbyes to everyone, and in so doing, kind of has a little private moment with Dorian specifically,
Hmm.
and reveals to him that she knows that he knows the truth of what happened. Because a few episodes ago, Dorian had his memory restored
Hmm.
and remembers the past with fy'ra, but neither of them had ever talked about that yet. But so she lets him know that, hey, I know you know, and she just encourages him to, hey, like, make the right decision. And it's pretty vague. And he just says, yeah, I'll do anything for my friends. And that's basically where the episode ends. But we do have another post-credit scene, and in this scene we see Ted, who's just basically exhausted from having to ward off that poison from Opal and protect her. And she is confronted with two purplish eyes, and Ted screams, and that's where the episode ends.
And that's episode number 6, The Gift Among the Green.
Numero seis.
So let's
Woo.
talk about it.
Yeah.
There was a lot of implications of this episode for sure. Um,
Yes.
and a lot of it, and I don't know where to start. We always say this every week. All right, where do we start?
I mean, unless you have someplace, I say let's just start right there because that's on my
Sure.
mind. The very end, which, like, clearly to me, those eyes are Murata, right? You think?
Right. Yeah.
Which is interesting because, I, I mean, I'm not trying to get too into the rules of D&D here, but um, Thraskell, is that right?
Yeah.
She removed the scrying spell, which, I mean, I guess could just mean like if there was an active spell happening, she stopped it.
They removed
They
it. Yeah.
And then I just didn't know if, I guess Murata just recast the spell, and so she now is scrying again. I took it to mean like, hey, I've prevented that from straight up happening at least for a while. But
I interpreted it as like Thraskell removing the scrying spell is sort of what forced Murata's hand of now I can no
oh,
longer see and track. So I need this now is taking this to the next level,
so that's why they
which is
attacked.
why Thraskell went in to kidnap Opal.
You mean
Um,
Murata?
why?
You
Murata
said
went in to kidnap
yeah,
Opal.
yeah. You said Thraskel, so I was just making sure
Yeah.
I didn't miss something even bigger. And I was like, wait,
Rascal's in on
what?
it.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
that
that'll be
makes
a separate
sense.
video. Why Thrascal's the big bad.
Things you missed.
Yeah.
But
Top
so
15. Anyway,
but so do you just take that to mean that she re-scryed on her? Or is that like a different implication altogether that maybe like she's
I
connected to her
think
or something?
I think this is different because there's actually a line of dialogue. Doesn't Murata say something like, "I've waited so long
I think
for
so.
this
Something
moment"?
like that. Something like that.
Um, Jamie, pull that up real quick. Hang on, let me look real quick.
And while you're looking, I'm just gonna speak. So clearly, and this is very obvious at this point. It's Ted is what she's after, right? Or at least what Ted represents in terms of some type of power, or I don't know. I'm just so confused because seemingly Ted was alive and a real person at some point. So it's weird to me that like I just don't know. I don't know what like the actual power of it is that she is after, and she thinks that she can take from Opal. But clearly it's something important enough that she says she'll burn down the whole world for it.
Which does that mean does she cause the Ono plateau?
That's interesting. I don't think so, just because that was, or wait, was that before they met them or after they met them?
Before they met them.
Oh, if it was before, then maybe. Okay, yeah, then maybe. I was thinking it was after.
So I just rewatched it, and we'll retcon our recap a little bit. I thought it was purplish eyes. It's a woman in purplish energy,
Mm-hmm.
and what she says is, "I've been looking for you for so long," and that's when Ted screams, which makes me want. I assumed it's Murata. Purple's like the theme
Yeah,
of this character.
they've been threading the purple with her, so
Yeah,
seemingly,
but that seems a bit strange, right?
yeah,
Because I mean, I don't know. Because when we first met Murata, they came more across like stewards of the forest,
right,
right? Like this is their place that they kind of keep the magic in check, the fae in check,
right.
and not I've been looking for you. Unless she went through the portal and she got possessed, and now it's not Murata, it's someone else, and they're looking for Opal to get to Ted. I don't know.
That would be interesting. But so in that moment where they met in the forest, she detected thoughts on Ted, right? And that's kind of the seemingly the impetus for all this is that's when she like I guess saw Ted and maybe realized what Opal is, whatever that may be.
Right.
And we even talked about this at length in that episode, whichever episode that was, that like there was some ominous comment about like a drop of water was slowly spreading and like this is not over yet. So to me that means that, and she may very well have gone through the portal, but to me that the shoot, I don't know.
Implication?
Yeah, like the implication was that like from that moment Murata was like trained in on her for whatever reason.
Yeah. 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 And going back to what I said a few minutes ago, it feels like this moment is a little bit different in that it seems like maybe it's the first time Ted has had this character speak to her.
Mm-hmm.
And it almost seems like, and this doesn't quite make sense because Murata escaped, right? And yet in this post-credit scene, it's almost as if she's arrived, she's there, and she's saying, "Hey, I've been like this is the moment I've been waiting for
Yeah.
almost." Um, Something else, Abria had tweeted out that this is largely a story about Opal, that her character is really central to the story, which makes me wonder what even is Opal and what is Ted?
Yeah.
What's the connection with their mother? And it
Right.
feels like this moment that happened in this last episode is going to be really critical for the next two episodes.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, it seems like at least Opal, Dorian, and to some extent Fern, but less recently because of the whole Dark Fern mirror. But so recently, Opal and Dorian seem like the major players here, and which we won't get into Dorian yet because I don't want to go there yet. But yeah, like there's something going on, and we briefly talked about how the fact that her dad had been to. Now, maybe did he make it all the way to Near Del Pak when he went to the ruins, or did he not, get that far? And what? How did Thraskell know that that was their mom? Is she just like wise, or did she know her mom? Perhaps her mom was been in the city, or I don't know. Obviously, it's somewhat connected, right? And probably all plays into whatever Opal is.
I thought it spoke to Thraskell's sort of clairvoyance,
Yeah.
but you make a good point that remember Byrodin's really the last town on the way to the ruins of Quinera.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of the last stop before you go into this thick jungle. And even though it's a month's journey, it's sort of the last spot on the map. And
Right.
so we know that her mom left when she was young. Maybe she did eventually make her way to Nirdalpak.
And this might be me reading too much into it, but the fact that her mom had two different eyes kind of made me, and I know that's like a real thing in life that people have, but maybe it was like a parallel to the fact that Opal is like has two people in her. So maybe like her mom had the same thing, and like that's like was a manifestation of that. Like it's
I
possible.
took it to mean something along the lines of Ted and Opal are both equal parts of whatever their mom was.
Mm,
Not just their mom's daughter, but there's more to the mother than meets the eye in the sense of
yeah.
I would assume some kind of creature of great power, some kind of human of great power or human-esque figure. Um, but yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. What do they call this dark place that Ted? I keep thinking of it as like the sunken place, but
Yeah.
it's called the what
Does it
space?
does it have a name?
The yeah, she calls it like the
Oh,
lithymic space,
liminal.
liminal,
Liminal space. Yeah.
liminal space. Um, which has anything in D and Critical Role been in this kind of space before?
Um.
Because I'm curious about like the properties of this place. Like, because if Murata's I'm wondering, is Murata physically there now? Is
Um.
she projecting herself there now? I mean, I'm not sure.
So I think that, I mean, from my interpretation of it, liminal was just like an adjective. Like I don't think,
Okay.
for me, I don't think it was like a proper name for that place. I think because liminal just means like kind of this like the space in between, like like it's I don't know, I don't have a good definition,
You're
but
doing a
like
good job of saying it without having to say it.
yeah, like
Well, I only
it's
ask because even in the post credits, because it was referenced earlier, but in the post credits, Abrius opens the post credits setting with we're in the liminal space again, basically.
mm, yeah,
And so maybe it is just a random adjective, but has now become like the name of where she is.
right,
Um, but it's interesting to me that I'm curious what's happening with Murata. I'm also curious why she's obviously very powerful.
mm-hmm,
I mean, animating the Bandersnatches and then Dimension Door, like these are not like level 2 or level 3 party type abilities.
right,
So she's obviously powerful. So I'm also curious, why did she leave? Like, why didn't she just like, hey, I'm going to kill all you guys? Um, and part of me wonders if she didn't need to, if what happened was enough to now allow her access to Ted as what we saw in the post credit scene.
yeah, that's a good point because I do think clearly she was scrying on her earlier. But I do think, like you mentioned, the fact that like there was apparently like words spoken and Ted like screams in response, that what Murata is doing now is at the very least more powerful than a scry. Like maybe it's like a more like it might not be an actual spell in D&D, but like now her presence is more physical, although I don't mean that she's like actually there, but like now she can actually interact with her. So maybe like you said that that poison dart or something gave her more intimate access to what's going on. But
Mhm.
I don't know.
So it says, here's what's interesting. I looked up just the actual spell scrying, because
Yeah.
I was just curious, how does it work? You can see and hear a particular creature you choose that is on the same plane of existence as you.
Hmm.
And so I wonder, is this liminal space, does Opal count for that? Or does Murata have some kind of, you know, beyond the physical plane of existence, way of actually, because that's what I was kind of getting at earlier was, is Murata actually physically here before Ted or not?
Yeah.
Um, which I don't know.
I feel like she's not, but I don't know. I it's just a guess, but she somehow is, communicating with her now. But I feel like and there doesn't have to be rules that make any of this make sense. Like it's D&D, you
Right.
can do whatever you want. But I'm just curious, and not to reach red ground here, but like, what is Ted? Like, so far, it's just been the cool flavor for warlock abilities, right?
Right.
But the fact that Murata is treating this as such like a world-ending power, it's like, what is this? Like, it seems more than just normal warlock patron stuff.
And the stakes are pretty high too, where it's like, I would burn the world to have you.
Yeah, and
You
and
got
and
you got problems. I mean,
yeah, she was like,
like
what?
so powerful that she would murder everyone
Right,
just to
yeah,
have it.
yeah.
That's what's interesting to me.
And what for? Like in her mind, does she have some noble ends justify the means? Like if I had this power, I could protect Singorn or whatever. Or is it like, hey, I want that power because I can like rule the world with it? Like I have no idea.
I did wonder if there was like more of like a ends justify the means type deal, like for the greater good, or if it was evil. But the burn the world thing kind of sold me on. Okay, if you're gonna, I'm thinking this is probably more nefarious if you're willing to burn the world. I don't know. I don't
That's
know.
fair.
But I did wonder though, because I was kind of straddling that line between, is it a power that, even at the expense of Opal, I need it for Singorn or for what's coming, or because you do have to wonder if the Tetrarchs are aware of some ominous
It's
omen
something's
over
coming.
something's coming, which I'm assuming is maybe a campaign 3 something. But if something's coming, I wonder if it's not just the Tetrarchs who are aware of that, but also other people like
Yeah.
the elves of Singorn who are aware that something is coming. Um, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, that's fair. I feel like we have so many like things that may be connected, and so that would make it make sense, but are potentially unconnected. Like whatever Opal is, what's going on there? The Spider Queen.
Hmm.
It's those seemingly aren't connected.
Right.
But then we have the Ash Hole. Is that connected to either of those two, or is it also its own thing? And then we have the something ominous that's coming. Is that any of the three things just mentioned, or is that another thing? And then we
And
also
yeah, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Keep
I was
going.
gonna say we also have, which I think this is connected to something, but we also have Dorian and the big decision that may or may not imply time travel. That is also like coming down the
Right.
pipes. What were you
And
gonna say?
the war mother, the war
Oh
queen, excuse
yeah,
me,
yeah,
the war queen.
right,
The thing that's older and nastier than Lolth.
right. That
That
that has control of fy'ra.
yeah.
What?
Um and also I guess the missing week ties into Dorian's decision. Um the figure they saw at the crater, that sort of is part
Right.
of this missing week.
Yeah.
And then there was one more thing I was thinking of. Oh, the nameless ones.
Right.
We haven't seen them
Posca.
in a couple episodes, but Posca and the nameless ones
Yeah.
who are doing something with residuum,
Yeah.
which maybe they're involved in one of these things. Maybe Posca's working with Murata. I don't know. Um, yeah, there's a lot happening here,
There is, and I feel like kind of
and and Umeji and the Iron Authority and all these other new characters being introduced. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine. I was just gonna point us back to what we were saying when we started the episode about how, and I don't want to speak for you, but we only have 2 episodes left, and here we are in this past episode. Like, I'm trying to be careful with my words here. I don't know. It just and D&D is its own game. It's a living, breathing world. That's what makes it great. So not everything has to be answered. Not everything has to be resolved. But I just still feel like with 2 episodes left, of those 100 things we just mentioned, I don't really know like what we're going toward.
Right.
Besides obviously something with Opal, but
Right. Yeah, and it's my biggest apprehension with the show right now is there's the world. Every episode is introducing another seat at the table
mhm,
of an important character, and so it's getting hard to mentally process where the momentum of the story is going.
exactly.
I thought last episode was really strong because the dreams with the Spider Queen was a very tangible, central. Okay, yeah, it brings us back to episode one, the
Right.
very first thing, the circlet. And that's really easy to grab onto and resonate with. And I'm not necessarily saying like any of this is too confusing for people or it's too confusing for us to follow. It's just in the constraints of 2 episodes left,
Right.
it's hard to really get a grip on where the story is going to go.
Mhm.
I will say Abria had tweeted out that one of her big goals with EXU was she wanted to leave the world bigger than she found it. And so that's why she created Nirdalpak and presumably introduced some of these other characters was so that when Taldore Reborn is published or when Campaign 3 is happening, there are these the setting isn't so much dependent on Matt's creation in the moment, but that we know this is a living, breathing world.
Yeah.
And so, in episode 30 of campaign 3, they meet the War Queen. You're like, oh man, the War Queen. I know who that is.
Yeah.
So like I get it from that aspect, but with 2 episodes left, this central theme of the show, it's really hard to get a sense of where we're going with this for sure.
Yeah, agreed. And I'm not, and I don't think you're saying this either. It's not that it's a bad thing. Like, it's awesome that this world building's happening. It's just that like it's hard to tell where we're going with 2 episodes left. And Abria might land the boat perfectly, and everything is like, oh, okay, yeah, I see what she was doing there, and but I just don't know what to expect, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but
Yeah, I think for me it's like a mix between I don't know what to expect and I'm apprehensive about being satisfied with the
yeah,
conclusion.
yeah,
And it's not so much like it's kind of like I joked about this on an earlier episode, but it's kind of like as we were getting towards the end of Lost, season 6 of Lost and there was like 4 episodes left and you were like, "Oh my gosh, there's so many things that they haven't answered yet." Like it's going to be I can't believe these geniuses are going to answer all this in 4 episodes. And then it was over and there was just and I love the show. It's one of my favorite shows, but I know there was a lot of people who were like, wow, okay, there's a lot of stuff that they didn't cover. And there was a sense of dissatisfaction of the emotion and energy put into what's that or what's happening here or what could happen here. Those plot threads sort of being left to the wayside. I'm apprehensive of the same thing happening in 2 episodes where it
yeah,
ends. And I think, man, that was such a great experience. Man, but I wish I could have gotten closure here, here, and here.
right. That's fair. And who knows what the next 2 episodes hold? And I know we've speculated about like, is there going to be a season 2 like with these people? Maybe, or or maybe some of these threads are picked up in C3. So I don't know,
Bria
but
does say when she's exiting fy'ra, she says something like, you'll see them again.
yeah, okay, let's talk about that because I wanted to bring that up. So that made me think that like, hey, uh Anjali maybe is not going to be in episode 7, but maybe is going to show back up in episode 8, or maybe is going to be there for both, but maybe she just like her character is away for a while. But then, and I hope this isn't like metagaming, but from like the language they've all been using on Twitter and stuff, I kind of got the vibe that like she was done.
I agree. Yeah. I had the same exact thought. I thought, oh, maybe she like scheduling issue, like couldn't
Yeah,
be on episode 7, but
right.
she'll be back to save the day in episode 8. Reading Twitter, there was a really awesome thread between Anjali and Abria that was basically like, thanks so much for letting me be part of the experience.
Yeah,
That was
yeah, I
really
saw
great.
that.
It was basically a goodbye thread.
Right.
And so yeah, I don't think she's back. But then that comment of, you'll see them again. I'm
Right.
thinking, so now I'm back on the bandwagon of this. This is an 8 episode story, but it's not the end. Maybe there will be a season 2, or maybe Abria was just being, throwing hopeless optimism to us.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So yeah, I didn't know what to make that. So like I wouldn't be surprised either way, like if she was done or if she did show back up. But I didn't know how to parse that. Um, which if she's we've had this whole time travel thing that we've been trying to wrestle with this whole time. And so if it is leading to some sort of time loop or something like that, then presumably she's going to show back up because there needs to be the whole moment where like Dorian makes his decision, whatever that is, and fy'ra sacrifices herself to let them all escape. Unless time travel, we're just making that up and it has nothing to do with time travel, and that just happened to or pre episode 1. I don't know.
We know that she describes herself arriving in the forest to help the party as just appearing, just being there basically, and knowing she needed to protect them. So yeah, maybe it's a weird loop where her leaving them is what leads her to somehow roundabout way help with the decision that puts her back in the forest. I don't know. This stuff gets way confusing to talk about.
I know, and I feel like there there's really been no concrete evidence to point to time travel at all, but it seems to make sense for like these weird vagaries we've been presented with. So
Mhm.
like I don't know if I'm just like being insane even like putting that on the table as a possibility, or if that's like if we're supposed to be thinking that, you know?
Yeah, I don't know.
But just I guess while we're on this, we have this big decision that Dorian is apparently going to make, which again implies that like how do you know that if time travel is not involved? But when we were talking about like the 5 different or whatever how many things there were, I'm wondering if the something ominous that Thraskell and the whole city was feeling vibes about, something bad was coming. Maybe to try to attempt to tie these all together, maybe it is the Spider Queen that they can like feel her presence becoming more powerful or something, and the big decision on is if Dorian facilitates this or not, like so I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they are all connected in that, and that's I don't know how Opal fits into that, but maybe the big ominous thing coming is also Dorian's decision, and it all is tied to the Spider Queen, and maybe she's the big bad, but it doesn't really feel like
Yeah.
she's tied to the ash hole, so I don't know.
I think I don't remember if it was Gunnar who said this or if it was in a previous episode, but when they're talking about the ash hole, they basically the description is I think it was Gunnar maybe. Or maybe not. But they're talking about it being something around massive energy as if something was trying to come through or something waiting to come through. I can't remember the exact
Yeah,
language.
yeah.
So to me, that paints a mental picture of something on the other side that is sort of gathering its strength to for the detriment of Taldore is something's going to be coming that's really bad. I wonder for me if that is connected to what the Tetrarchs have sensed as something's coming.
Right, yeah.
Um, which
That
I
makes
mean,
sense too.
it could be, or it could be like we said with Abria and her world building. It could be campaign 3 is going to have a number of major villains that they're going to work through.
Yeah. As mm,
Which Dorian, I I love Dorian's like, she's like, don't do this decision. He's like, I'll do anything for my friends.
yeah.
And you're kind of unsettled by that. It's kind of like, okay, that didn't really convince me. I still feel pretty nervous about you, Braun.
Yeah, bro, I hope they do a campaign wrap up talking about all this because I want to ask so many like specific questions cuz like yeah, this decision which when she speaks like that, it's almost referencing like she knows she's implying she's implying that he knows what she's talking about. You know, like hey, like
Right,
make the right decision this time. And so how could she possibly know unless there is some sort of time travel involved where she's familiar with it?
right.
And like if it is that important, how I mean, he has to make it himself. Like I feel like she should be doing more to like,
Yeah,
like tell everybody
yeah.
else what's going on. You know what I'm
I
saying?
was really surprised she left actually. Like, because earlier in her conversation with Thraskell, she's talking to Thraskell. Thraskell reveals that fy'ra is alive, which is a whole nother thing.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second.
Um, but fy'ra basically says like, well, I can't leave them. Like I've been called to protect them.
Mm-hmm.
And Thraskell says, well, and you have, like they're all here. And we sort of get without so many words that this sense of duty towards them versus her own, not selfish, but her own like internal desires to go see her sister.
Right.
And it was that conversation that made me think like, no, she's going to table her sister because this is really big.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever they left the plaza and the chase scene happened and they were like, we're all good. And she was like, okay, guys, I got to go. I was a bit surprised that, yeah, like you said, that she wasn't like, hey, by the way, just so you guys all know, our boy Braun over here, Bronny, he's going to not just ruin us, but destroy the world or something.
Yeah.
We all got to make sure he doesn't do this. It's just weird to me that she was so casual and, I don't know, just that like, hey, by the way, don't do that again.
Yeah.
And then he's like, don't worry. And I'm even surprised she wasn't like, okay, that didn't convince me. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Exactly. So I mean, maybe we can after episode 8, we can kind of look back at these things through a different lens and maybe it'll all click and make sense, but I don't know. And this also brings me back to something we mentioned in an earlier episode where like if if there is, and I hate that I'm even doing this many what ifs, but if there is time travel and a decision that they're both already aware of, that would require a Bria like giving them metagame knowledge, right? Like,
Right.
like she would have had to tell Robbie that like, hey, Dorian did this or whatever. And I don't know that I mean I was gonna say that
Well,
like seems strange, but I mean I guess it's not. You could do whatever in D&D, but
yeah, I mean, we talked about this last episode, or maybe the one before that, on like, is this a story that's naturally happening and it just so happens to be eight episodes, or was there a bit more of a storyboarding happening prior to what we're seeing that
mm,
we sort of already know things are going to happen? And I think we were a bit split on it. Split's not the right word. I think both of us went kind of back and forth on like it could be either way.
yeah.
It does. I mean, I guess Dorian could be totally in the dark and could be totally clueless and is just continuing to act, and be
Yeah.
like, yeah, I mean, I do know what happened, but I don't actually really know.
Yeah.
Um, it could also, it does seem more like Abria probably pulled him aside and said, hey, this is what happened. This is what you remember. And it just happened off camera. So,
And then
but sorry, I don't mean to
no,
interrupt
go
this
ahead.
now. But the other reason why I think this is a bit more storyboarded and enforced rather than natural is everyone else knows not to ask about it. Like like no one asks or brings up the missing week. Like no one in conversations with people who could like shed, like Thraskell, who's obviously observer-esque and
True.
knows all these things. No one's like, hey, we have this fuzzy week. What happened? And so the
Yeah.
actors are almost avoiding the conversation, so much so that you and I early on in episode 2 or 3 were like, is there a missing week? Or are they
Yeah.
just like, it was even confusing for us.
Hmm.
So for me, I feel like there's something pre-written here, which maybe that goes against the flavor of D&D. Maybe not if you see it as like, this is a setup for campaign 3. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean it really could be anything, right? Like it not that sounded dumb coming out of my mouth, but like It could still be that like we're just not privy to it yet, but there is like a purpose while remaining unpre-written. Like maybe just before the game, she told them like, "Hey, you are missing this week, but like it's like you don't even really like the memories. It's not that it's like how am I trying to say this? Like almost like you have amnesia and you don't even realize you don't know type of thing. So maybe it's just like in
Okay.
character to like not mention it because like that
That
would
makes more
it'd
sense,
almost be
actually.
metagaming to try and talk about it type of thing. I don't know.
Yeah, that satisfies me, actually. Yeah, not even realizing that you're missing a week.
Yeah.
Or you assume that it was from, I think you were the one who picked up and said, "Hey, do you think something happened?" And I was like, "No, they were just wasted." Like it could be very much what they believe is like, "No, yeah, we just don't remember what happened. It was a drunken party."
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great answer. That's a good point.
Okay, but why is Robbie not telling anyone else what he remembered, you know? Why is he like why did he not tell everyone else that, "Hey, yeah, we do know fy'ra"? You know? Like it's playing into kind of like this art his character arc he's having where he like may do some messed up stuff in service of his friends, but still some messed up stuff. I just don't know. There's more to him.
Yeah, I mean, I think his moment of clarity of knowing who she was has changed his tune a little bit on who she is, like the paranoia around her. Because at the start of this episode, he opens with an apology to her,
Yeah,
basically saying, "Hey, you are one of us. Sorry
that's
for
true.
being so standoffish." I wonder if maybe the reason he hasn't brought it up to the party is because he's he's fearful. He's fearful of what they might think of him or do to him, or I mean, these people's validation has been a lot to him. He's part of their family, presumably after having to leave his own, and he might even be terrified. And I mean, think about episode one Dorian. I mean, the bardic, uh, just feel good character. I mean, he might be terrified and thinking, "There's no way I could make that decision. That would never happen." Um, so he might just be in denial about it, so he doesn't want to tell it to people. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
And he probably also senses that Orem is a bit suspicious of him.
yeah,
Um,
that's true.
because even when they were going skinny dipping, Orem mentions that he watches the crown all the way
Right. Yeah.
from Dariax over to Dorian when Dorian's holding the clothes. And then once he feels like it's safe, is when he jumps in himself.
Yeah. I hope we get some of these answers. I don't expect to get all of them, but I hope we get some of them.
Yeah, and maybe that's a great question. Is I feel like we end up talking about this. Where do we go from here? I've seen rumblings on Reddit of people who think we're heading towards a TPK, which
Really?
for the amateur D&Dsman, that's a total party kill. So some people are guessing that that's where we're heading, since there are so many open plot threads that maybe we're just heading to a boom. Something's going to happen that wipes out the party. You and I have talked about, are we heading towards someone putting on the circlet? Um, Abria's comments on fy'ra knowing she'll see them again makes me wonder, are we going to have a sort of cliffhanger ending, but the party's still relatively intact and there will be a season two? I don't know.
Me neither. Uh, I did want to talk about, sorry, her sister being alive, Fy'ra's sister being alive. And kind of that just tying into something we mentioned earlier that I'm glad you reminded me of is that the Spider Queen saying that, oh, something meaner than me is involved with Fy'ra. What the hell is going on there? Just to tie that back into a little thing we said last episode that, or I did, I didn't want to, I didn't feel like the test that they were given, by the Wild Mother, by the voice, I wasn't convinced that that actually was the Wild Mother.
Right.
But given what we got in this episode, it seems like it was, unless there is just this huge ass conspiracy going on. But it seems like, okay, that was the Wild Mother. But so if that's the case, if it is the Wild Mother, everything is on the up and up, then what was the Spider Queen referring to when she says that she's wrapped up in something worse than me? I have
Well, we know
nothing.
they're fired Genasi. We know that we don't know. I assume they come from some fire elemental plane. Um, fy'ra Rai, when she tells her story over drinks, she talks about, she doesn't say like, hey, we were over at like, that mountain over there. She says we were kids and we were climbing a fiery outcropping,
Hmm.
which is oddly specific. I envision a fiery place, and so I didn't know if that was literally just like they grew up living in a volcano, or if they literally lived like in a fire plane or something. If it's the latter, though, the older, worse evil could be whatever's trying to come through the burning sigil or marking through the burning sigil. And it could even mean that fy'ra is sort of being used as a prop or dangled to get fy'ra to maybe leave the party, but more importantly, to get her back north.
Okay, that's what I was gonna get at because if that is what's happening, then that means Thraskell was in on it because Thraskell's the one that told her that her sister was still alive. So if that is a manipulation, and so that got me thinking, like, is Neardil Pak like all not what it seems? I don't think that's true, but I don't
It'd
know.
be a pretty long game,
Yeah.
considering she's been there before. It could be that, Thraskell sort of like pulls on threads as they come to gain insights. And there's a god or a deity that's smart enough to know what thread to feed,
Yeah.
to sort of guide people. Because here's the deal, it's interesting how the party is so quick to trust voices that speak to them. And this party's interesting. They get a lot of voices of
True.
gods who the Observer, Melora, Spider Queen. I mean, they have a lot of people who are like, hey, what's up? I'm this god, I'm this deity.
Yeah.
And they're like, cool, yeah. And they just trust it. Right. And so there's a lot of naivety with that. And so I really liked your guess on Melora, whether it was true or not. It feels like a missed opportunity if one of these voices aren't fully what they seem.
Yeah, and I don't know. I feel like I feel like that's not the case, but that still doubt is still in my mind, especially because, the city had to test them to see if they were worthy. They didn't really do anything, in my opinion. It just simply asked, like, what would you do? And even Dorian, I think, would have kind of failed the test if you were asking my opinion about it, and yet he still got let in.
And Fear Rise said they've passed with flying colors.
Yeah.
So what did they do? I mean, they gave very milk toast reactions of like, I guess I'd leave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
It wasn't
they
really like a test of like courage or like
right.
bravery or integrity, heroism. And I don't know. How about like, what if I wanted to kill one of your friends? What would you do?
Right.
Take Fear Rai. She's the worst. I mean, that's what I envisioned Dorian saying. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Exactly. So I feel like this all is basically hinging on the one thing that the Spider Queen said, which maybe that was just manipulation on her part. Maybe she was lying about Fear Rai being wrapped up in something, like
Yeah.
maybe that was a misdirect, but I don't know, I'm hung up on that. And I'm hung up specifically on the visual of the memory dream that Dorian was given of Fear Rai like staring at him, being like engulfed by black tendrils, or it was something like that. So to me, I'm wondering if like in that moment, whatever that moment was, she was corrupted or taken by some entity or something. But it doesn't really make sense now because unless she's playing a super long game, but that doesn't seem to be the case.
Yeah. And I mean, like her leaving also, how's she going to show up and do that again? I don't know.
Well, I guess she can be teleported, so maybe she'll just get pooped.
Yeah.
But
And then what's going on with the nameless ones? When they going to show up?
yeah, I mean they have to, right? I feel like Posca at
Right.
least has to show up again. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I
But
don't know. It's interesting how, and then I guess the other thing going on the same like conversation of like passing the test and being able to find Neardalpak. Is it so simple that just following someone who does pass the test is able to find it? Because like, how does Murata
true.
end up there as
Right.
well? Which she does have the residuum spikes. Maybe that sort of suppresses the
Oh yeah,
magic.
we don't know what that was about still.
Maybe it suppresses the magic and allows her to see the city. I don't know.
That makes sense because I forgot that that even happened because there was no reference to that. So I mean, that makes sense to me. So maybe she bypassed the test.
Mhm.
Huh.
Or maybe we're just grasping at straws to try to make
We're probably doing
try to
that
make things
too.
make sense.
We're probably doing a little bit of that too.
So it's the fun of the show, though.
Yeah.
Talking about what if. Speaking of what if August 13th.
Ooh.
Actually, I don't know what day it is, but
Ooh. I think it's
yeah,
next
talking about
week.
talking about what if and what could be happening, and it's part of the journey, part of the fun of watching the show, and it's also why we always invite you guys, the listeners, to drop in the comments and tell us what you think on what the heck's going on, what's going to happen in the next 2 episodes, and where do we go from here. So
Yo, yeah, for real. Like, we don't get enough of them. I'm sad that we don't get enough comments and discussion. If you have made it to this part of the video, please just say hello and I'll personally respond. Would love to talk theories with you guys. Um,
yeah.
but
So
yeah,
anything else you wanted to talk about from this episode?
there was I'm sure there's a ton of things, but there's one thing that I actually remember to talk about. And this is just a little what ifing for you. The seed. The
Mm.
seed that Orem is given. And I just want to talk a little bit about that. And because wasn't it said that someone had just come through and left it for him or
It
something
said
like that?
it said it had just arrived on the wind because I went back and watched.
Okay.
I went back and watched that scene again.
And it arrived for him,
It says it just
presumably.
arrived on the wind and they knew it was for him.
Okay.
So not like intentionally like, hey, this is for Orem,
Right. Right.
but Thraskell knew this is for Orem. Or I guess maybe once Thraskell met him as an Ashari, was like, oh, this is probably for you.
Yeah. It's not like it had a note that said for Orem. It was more of like, oh, this is for you, like an
Yeah.
intuitive type of thing.
Yeah.
Um, I probably have more to say on this than you do, but because this is what I'm gonna say is based on campaign one. Um, and I'm just pulling this out of nowhere, so I have no real basis for this other than hey, seed, tree. There's a very important's not really the right word, but like prominent tree in campaign one called the sun tree, and it was like it was special, but not in any like it's omega powerful type of way. It recurred a lot, and it was a very big prominent tree, and part of me wonders if this is like a seed to make another a type of tree like that,
Hmm.
and
Okay.
perhaps in I forgot the name of it, Zephyra, that where he's from, to maybe perhaps have a sun tree there because the one from campaign one was not in Zephyra; it was in Whitestone. Um,
Yeah.
I
Okay.
have no basis for saying this. It's not. I don't even know if sun trees are rare, But I just have no idea what else to even think of with a big mysterious seed being given
I
to
just,
an
I
Ashari.
just, I just loved how Liam O'Brien acted it out of like, graciously like, thank you. What do I do with this? It's just like everyone's wondering the same thing.
Yes, exactly.
Uh,
But
so make it grow. Okay. Tucks it away.
my hope was just that in campaign three or whenever that like, because I mean presumably he's gonna take it back to Zephyra, right? Like his home. Is my best guess at least. So just hoping to maybe one day see like we see some magnificent tree there, and then it's just like a little Easter egg. They're like, oh yeah, Orem planted that 30 years ago or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it feels like this can't be the end of these characters because of the setups beyond these next 2 episodes. Whether that is a season 2 of some kind, or if these characters will show up again in campaign 3, I'm not really sure. But something like the seed to me makes me think there's a longevity to this party beyond 2 episodes.
Yeah, or at the very least, their legacy. Maybe we never see Orem again, but we do see the tree. I don't know.
Yeah. Which do we know? Are these events happening at the same time as the Mighty Nine?
No, there's like a time, there's like an infographic that explains the whole timeline of like all Critical Role. So I don't know the exact number, but I'm pretty sure this is like 10 to 20 years after Mighty Nine. So we're
Okay.
currently like the most present of anything that of anything in the canon. Like this is the most recent happenings.
Okay, yeah, because I knew that I knew we were obviously like way past the episodes of
Vox Machina.
Vox Machina, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't sure about the rest of it. So
Yeah.
but yeah, you're spot on. Here's a map. So it's actually, yeah, it's 20 years after the Mighty Nine.
20. Okay.
So
yeah.
wait, no, it's not. Sorry.
Oh, it's not.
I don't know what this is. The Tales of Exandria. I don't know what that is. Sorry, Exandria Unlimited. We're 6 years after the Mighty Nine.
Okay, 6. Tales of Exandria, I think, are it's like a book, I think.
Comic
Or
book.
comic
Yeah.
books. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. So Mighty Nine was 25 years after Vox Machina, and Exandria is 6 years after the Mighty Nine.
Okay.
So, okay, cool. The more you know.
We've got a bunch of illusions and Easter eggs. It'd be interesting to see if we maybe get a campaign 2/Mighty Nine Easter egg before it's all said and done.
Yeah.
I won't say anything. Like I won't even give any potentials because I don't want to spoil. But it would just be interesting.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, maybe it's a good time to call it there.
Yeah.
And for our listeners, let us know what you think about the episode. And we'll catch you tomorrow. I guess we'll be watching episode 7, and then we'll be recording the day after before my man Will goes on his vacation.
Yeah,
So
we'll get that up quick. We just got to do the thumbnail now.
yeah, I have a baby screaming outside my door.
Okay,
so
we'll do it quick. What do you want to do?
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe like stargazing or something.
Okay, like
like yeah, like this.
Okay, I think we got it.
All right, cool.
Alrighty, man.
All right.
I'll talk to you soon.
All right, thank you guys for listening. We'll catch you later. Deuces.
Bye.